All right, we're live. Say hello.
Hello.
Welcome to The Real Deal.
Well, thanks, Alex.
Thank you for having me, man.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming all the way from New York.
Yeah, I got to have my cousins behind the camera. I got to have a few drinks. Oh, we forgot the alcohol. We're supposed to have a drink on camera, man.
We'll do it another time.
We'll do it another time.
We'll do it later afterwards.
We'll do it when you're in Miami in
October. That
October.
sounds even better.
Fair?
Yeah.
Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex Vidal. I am president of DisG International Realty and host of the show you're watching today, The Closer Club, episode number 64, with one of the most powerful people in our industry when it comes to news, Mr. Amir Korangy, the publisher of The Real Deal. Again, Amir, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Before we get started, I don't know if you know this. I was reminded when I was talking to ISG, Craig Studnick, the owner of ISG, Veronica, the marketing director.
Sure.
You know, there's a long history between you and ISG. When you launched the South Florida Market Report for the very first time,
Right,
in 2012?
I don't know when. We started in South Florida in 2007.
Okay.
The company is, I started the company in 2003 here in New York, and then we went, Florida was the obvious next place for us, so we went there in 2007. And then I don't know when the first marketing report came out.
So you launched it on one of the projects that ISG represented, on the pool deck of one of the projects.
Oh, that's right. That's true.
I think it was Biscayne.
That was the first event that we did in Miami.
Cool.
Yeah, that was
Nice.
great.
Well, we'll talk about that, but thank you.
Sure, yeah,
We
absolutely.
have a storied history, and it's a great.
Well, I just remember what a great success that was, because that was when the market was just coming back.
That's right.
And I remember Craig saying, like, everybody who bought here is gonna make a killing. And this was, I think it was in 2012. And he was so right, because like about 2 years later, I remember him saying, like, we sold that project out.
Sure.
And all those people who bought in 2012 could sell now for like 100% more, something ridiculous.
Some crazy number.
Yeah, yeah.
So and we'll talk about that in the market and how it differs. So I'm trying to remember my questions, but I'm going to go off paper because I don't want to mess up.
No.
Particularly when it comes to your background. You're from Tehran.
Yeah.
Similar to Shahab, who I had on the show a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Shahab's a very fancy guy. I'm not as fancy as Shahab.
Shahab, what's interesting about him was I didn't know him.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was just waiting in the waiting room like this, and he comes out, guns blaring, talking to the guy from Core, I forgot his first name right now. And they were just talking, and then he turns around and was like, Alex, hey! He had a lot of energy.
He's a very personable guy and very nice guy. Yeah.
Surprising. So from Paris, Madrid, Washington, D.C., Baja, Mexico, now the Big Apple.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your path to what many consider the real estate Bible, the real deal.
If the real deal is the Bible of real estate, does that make me Jesus? Because I think
you have a beard.
That would be sacrilegious. But it's funny. People always say that, and I'm a little uncomfortable with it because especially for religious people. And do I isolate all the Jews and the Muslims? If it's the Bible, no. But it's a huge compliment, and of course I take it very seriously. And we do speak the truth. Because before we started, there was nothing that was focused on real estate news. Surprisingly, real estate was the #1 grossing revenue makers for newspapers, but it wasn't something that they took seriously. They wouldn't have dedicated writers and reporters for it. And when we came on the scene, we were like, we're just going to focus on real estate, and not just residential, but commercial and development and financing and architecture and construction, the whole universe, because I really believe they all go hand in hand. And so when we started, the market immediately responded, and it was a great feeling because I only had money to do it for 4 issues, and there was no website there. It was just a print issue, and I was doing it out of my apartment. So when the market responded, I never wrote checks that big before in my life, like writing for printers and for the distribution, and all of a sudden I'm like taking all my savings and just throwing it out the window every month. And but it just when the audience responded, it felt so good that I was like, I'm doing the right thing, and I was just sort of blindly like continue to write those checks, and it felt really good.
That's a great feeling, because I think I have that with the show as well. Like I think I'm doing something good. I think we're providing great content with great guests.
Even though the revenues weren't there, like it felt good to do it, and I was like, this is it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now you are one of the few people that have, because you report, you're kind of in the know with all the major markets in the country: Chicago, LA, New York, Miami, or South Florida, because you cover Fort Lauderdale and Miami. What would you say is the biggest differentiator with Miami compared to these other world-class cities, and what are some of the common denominators?
That's a great question. I think the biggest differentiator is that I've never seen a city so far away from New York be so, like, there be so much overlap. And I know people think that, there's, Miami is definitely its own city, but the amount of people from New York that invest in Miami is they call it the 6th borough of New York.
Sure.
And it's amazing because there's not a major developer here in New York that doesn't have some investment or some property or some sort of a connection with Miami. And I think in that regard, it's very unique in that regard that it's connected to New York. But then once you are in Miami, once we went down to Miami and had our writers and our office down there, we realized what an expansive city it is and how international it is and how popular. I always consider Miami the New York of South America. I don't know if people in South America think about it that way, but that's how I always thought about it. And it's the Miami of New York, and it's the New York of South America. I don't know if that makes sense, but in that regard, I thought Miami was somewhat similar. But Miami is relatively a small city compared to Chicago and Los Angeles. But the engagement for real estate news in Miami it's beyond LA and it's beyond Chicago.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. And it goes beyond just the real estate people. Everybody's invested in real estate news in some way.
What do you attribute that to? What is it?
When I first launched Miami, I remember Don Peebles, who's a big Miami guy. He came and he said, "Look, nobody is doing real news on all the changes that are happening in Miami. Not the dailies, not the weeklies, not the local papers." He was like, if you just bring like news, like really double down on the content and the editorial down there, he was like, I promise you that it will have an impact on your traffic. And it was so true. I took his advice. I put 4 reporters down there, and it's not just the real estate people coming to see us, it's the finance people, it's the construction people, it's the tourism and hotel people, and all of these people who are coming to get the news from us because nobody's really covering that market like that. So it's been great. And obviously Miami, we were in Miami earlier than we were in LA and Chicago, so we still have a lot of building to do in those markets. Okay. But it's amazing. There's just a level of interest from Miami. It's not just people in Miami, it's people from Canada looking at Miami news, and it's people from Israel and like all over the world like looking at what we write about Miami. But in Chicago, you don't get that. You don't get that international appeal of people coming to read Chicago real estate news. But in Miami, you do.
Again, this is not on the questions, but it triggered a question. What country is the #1 country looking at the real deal about South Florida real estate?
South Florida real estate, it's Brazil, surprisingly. That's the highest one. And then Israelis are just interested in real estate in general in the U.S., so Israel's always like in the top 3. Yeah. But it's Brazil, and then it's Canada. So Canada and Brazil sort of go back and forth.
Surprised I didn't think about that question before. Now, you talked a lot about Miami coming in 2007, and here we are 12 years later. How has Miami changed in those 12 years that you've been covering it? And where do you see it going?
We came into Miami when the market was just about to crash, right? And but there was so much development going on. Like there's news, whether the market's going up or down, people have to get content and get news and find out what's going on. So we thought no matter what happens to the market, there is readership there. And in those 12 years, it's amazing. People have like very long careers in real estate in Miami, which is very encouraging.
22 years.
It's great, right? And it's very encouraging. I love that. And in New York, you sort of have that as well. And I think in Chicago you do. But in some of the other cities, I feel like people sort of dip their toes into it. Not that they don't do that in Miami, but like it's a very serious business, and people take their real estate very seriously. Sure.
So when you first started reporting in Miami in 2007, now you're reporting in 2019.
Yeah.
How has it changed?
Oof, man, so much. I mean, just the kind of investments that have come into Miami, the kind of developments that they're doing, and I really believe the sort of architecture for high-rise architecture that's happening. I feel like the stuff that's being done in Miami surpasses a lot of other markets.
Now, I should have asked you before. You talked about Miami being the 6th borough of New York and all that. Are you seeing? There's a lot of news out there about New Yorkers moving to South Florida.
I just noticed I'm really man-spreading here.
So. No, it's all good. No, I think we're camera from what Jose can tell. I think we're up this way. But are we truly seeing the amount of those New Yorkers coming down to South Florida? And do you think you'll be one of them?
I was going to buy something. I love that 10 Museum.
Sure.
I think Chad Oppenheim designed that. I always liked that place, and there was a great opportunity to buy something there. I have the general attitude that for a second or third home, I'd like to rent, and have the freedom and the flexibility of renting, especially with Airbnb and like hotels tonight and things like that. It gives me a lot more flexibility. But I always said I would never have a second home, and I did get a second home, out east here in Long Island. But because I really loved it, and I had to have it. But this for Miami and other places, I like having the flexibility of staying at hotels or Airbnb if I have to.
Now, one of the questions I've asked pretty much, so this is episode 64. I think I've asked this question at least 15 times. If you were to give Miami an age, if Miami was a human, and you were to give it an age based on its evolution of where it's at and where it's going, what age would you give it?
Oh, she would be 38 years old. Her name would be Maria, and she speaks at least 2 languages. She's a professional during the day, wears heels, and can very comfortably walk into the office with heels. And at night time, she's out dancing and enjoying dinner with friends, and that's who I see. She's not necessarily married.
Yeah, you got very specific, but that's what a lot of people said. 20s, 30s is where they're going.
Because I really feel like Miami really happened. I feel like in the 80s. I feel like that's when that was the big, became a destination beyond the retirees and those other people.
Got it. All right. So now I don't remember the rest of my questions, so I'm going to pull them out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Real Deal specifically. Print, web, top events. Where do you see the future of the Real Deal and the future of real estate news reporting in general?
Well, for me, a lot of people, when they introduce me, they say he's in real estate. And I'm not in real estate, I'm in media. Right? Sure. And so media has taken a lot of different, roles, especially recently, and it's changed in a lot of ways. For me, those are all just different channels, right? I create content, that's what I do. If social media is a channel, I use it as a channel to distribute my content. Web is a channel, distribute it. Print, I'll get it out there. Events, I'll get my content out through all of these different channels, and that's the way I look at it. And media is constantly changing, right? Your Vices and your BuzzFeeds and Business Insiders. In the last, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but people were relying so heavily on Facebook traffic, right? They would pay $1 to Facebook to get 2 readers back, or 3 readers back, and that was their business. Let me buy audiences. Luckily, we never had to do that. We have a very old way of looking at journalism, and they're just produce really great content, and the people will find you. They'll come to you, and they'll build trust with you. We try to be smart about SEO and all that stuff and tagging, but we're not trying to cheat the system to get readers. We really believe that if you put great content out there, people will find you to be the destination for good content. And there has to be trust with readers and the media company, right? They have to know that you are putting their benefit in front of all else. Your advertisers can't have an influence on you. That's a very hard thing to swallow, especially as a publisher, because we had a situation, it happens in Miami all the time, where people are like, well, I'm not going to advertise with you because you wrote this story. I'm like, is there something factually wrong with the story? They're like, no, but you shouldn't be covering Miami this way. And for me, transparency is key, right? If you have transparency in the market, you're going to have a stable market. And when you have a stable market, you have a stable community, and you can actually build on it. It's not because people didn't know information. People know information and they're still investing, or they're not investing.
Sure.
And that's good, because if they have information that tells them not to invest, they shouldn't invest. It's not their job or our job to hide that information from investors and people who are in the market, right? I think that's the worst thing you can do. And so for us is to, the most important thing is to create transparency. Yeah. And it's hard for a lot of people to understand that, and it's hard for me to get their response, because they're like, we're not going to advertise with you. And we're like, well, I'm sorry, because I have to answer to my readers first before I answer to my advertisers.
That's a great point. The back, obviously ISG puts out the Miami report, and they're approached by every single developer on the planet to put ads in the Miami report, and they choose not to because it's unbiased information that the community, the real estate community, investors, buyers, realtors need to know about what's happening in the real estate market. That's one of the reasons why you rely on it too, right? Because if not, it could be biased towards the developers that are paying to be.
Yeah, I think they do a solid report. I think it gets better and better every year. The ISG report, and we're not trying to recreate the wheel, so we use good reports when they're out there.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right, lightning round, short answers.
Sure.
So, what does the Real Deal consider newsworthy?
Well, there's two kinds of news, right? There's news that I need to know, and then there's news that I want to know, right? So, so it's fun because the need to know stuff is generally not. It's not what gets us a lot of traffic and stuff, but it's important for them to know, right? So we put that out there. This is important news that you should know about, even though it's not sexy. And then there's news that I want to know, which is like, hey, Brad Pitt bought a house, or something like that. So we get tons of people feeding us news, and we have to choose what's going to be interesting for our readers, and that's the key part. I think that's our job, as we're sort of like art curators of what goes into a museum. Like, this is quality for the Met, and this is not, right? So you just have to decide that as editors.
So I'll jump around into another question which is what are the types of stories that get the most hits and why?
That's funny. There's no secret formula to it, but there are some common denominators with them. Like, there's some names that pop up, especially depending on the specific markets, where there's certain names that if you have them in the headline, it'll just blow up and it'll do really, really well.
Can you share that, or you rather keep that on the wraps?
Well, well, recently Jeffrey Epstein, right? So, so like you have him, we did something about his island. We were the first to break that, and that it got over like 80,000 views, which in like 2 days, which is pretty good for us. But when your average story is getting about 20 and this is getting 4 times that, it's we're like, okay, well, can we find out anything else about Jeffrey Epstein that we could like write about? Because obviously people are really curious about him. So, and seeing what people read and what articles people are interested in, it tells us like where we need to do a follow up on this, because people are really interested in this. So.
Now, I'm a realtor, but my main job is running the company that we discussed off camera.
Sure.
So what's the best way for a realtor to get something that's newsworthy out to you guys?
Well, it's tricky because, you want to get everything you do out in the media because it promotes your brand and everything like that. Then we just have to think about if it's worthy of for our readers. Like, we can only put so many stories out there because we don't want to be one of these sites that just puts everything out there. Like, it's not a wire, it's a news site. So then our readers trust us. Like, they're like, well, you know what? We never, here's a topic that I didn't know about, but The Real Deal picked it, so let me read it, because these guys know what they're talking about, or they know what's important to the market. So in that regard, we try to be curators, and you should never hold back a story. Let us decide if it's a story or not. Just come to us with everything that you have, and then let the editors figure out if it's a story or not.
So how do they come to you? Is there
you could just send it to news@therealdeal.com, or
News at the Real Deal.
hit it. And then there's you could call us. A lot of people have good relationships with our reporters down in Miami. So
that's right. Catherine is one of the.
Catherine is great, and Ina and Keith Lawrence.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's funny because like Keith has an amazing relationship with the White House. So like he gets a lot of scoops from the White House, which is great. Because they come to us before they go to some of the other major publications. So,
that's great. What's something people would be surprised to know about you?
I don't know if I want him to know that.
Well, you were a runner, right?
Yeah, I ran the marathon. It was an absolute disaster, but I finished it, and I never forget, because right before I ran it, somebody said, Amir, no matter what happens, finish, because this is my 9th marathon, and I didn't finish the first one, and I still feel like there's something missing. And I was like, man, damn, like I can't even think about quitting now, because that guy made it sound horrible. And I was like, all right, and so I had my mindset on finishing the marathon. And he was like, it's gonna get really hard, but just lean forward. And believe it or not, that really worked.
It does work. It moves your feet forward.
Yeah, and I was like, it was such a poor performance that I was like, I gotta do another one. So that same year, the first one I did in Paris, and then that same year I did the New York City Marathon.
Okay. And
that wasn't that much better. So I was like, I'm done with running marathons. So.
Right. 2 more questions.
Sure.
Book. And I ask this to every guest, a book, podcast, or TED Talk recommendation, or all 3.
Yeah. No, it's good. I like a book that really helped me change my business is How Google Works, right? And I thought that was an amazing book by Eric Schmidt. So Eric Schmidt comes into Google, and Larry and Carl tell him, like, look, the operations are fine, right? Like the product works great. What we need to do is go from 3,000 people to 50,000 people, keeping the quality and the culture. And this was during the tech boom. So, finding quality people that are of caliber for that kind of company, and not having them leave, and keep adding to it, and not adding 50 or 20, but thousands at a time, and keeping the quality. And it's a great book on how to scale and keep quality, and I thought it was a very helpful book, and I recommend it to everybody who owns a business. And for all my sales guys, as soon as they come in, I get them Dale Carnegie's How to
Win Friends and Influence.
Yeah, so I think that's a very useful book for people to say. I think everybody should read it, but definitely for people in sales, they should read it.
I think everybody. No, not everybody realizes everybody's in sales.
Yeah.
Even my wife, who's a doctor, she's in sales.
Sell her services, right?
Sell her services, or get somebody that wants an antibiotic for their kid who doesn't need it, to get them to convince them that the antibiotic's not the right thing to do.
I get it. Yeah, I tell that to our guys too. It's like no matter what we do, there's some sales process to it. And for my sales guys, I also tell them, like, if you look at the Fortune 500 companies, right, most of those CEOs came from the sales side of the business, sales or marketing side of the business. They were the guys who were they were in the Mark Zuckerbergs, right? They're the guys who are actually doing the sales, and that's who you want eventually leading the company, because that's such every company relies on sales, right? So it's interesting, because a lot of people find sales to be a sort of a dirty word, but it's in everybody's business.
And I know it.
Yeah.
Now this is really my last question,
Sure.
only because of the Real Deal and its influence and the importance that it plays in the real estate community. What's the legacy that you want the Real Deal to have in our business?
Well, I really want to be the one-place shop for real estate professionals and people interested in real estate. I want to be that Bloomberg sort of the news for real estate. And that's what we always aim for with doing really quality content and adding different features. For the last 16 years, we've really focused on the one thing that we started with, which is content. But there's a lot of other channels I like to be able to add to it, and hopefully something that lasts.
All right, great. So we'll see you in October.
Absolutely. I have two very special guests coming for that.
You want to announce it?
I can't announce it now, but if this was 3 days from now, I would have been able to announce it. But two very big national guests coming to that, which will be amazing. Every year it's an amazing show. I love that crowd in Miami, and it's such a community. Everybody knows each other. That show is a bigger show for us than the New York show. And it's and everybody knows each other.
That's right.
Everybody's connected, and everybody knows each other from different places. I love going there for that. Yeah.
Amir,
Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Any parting words for the camera as I go around?
And no, just keep your head up.
There you go.